kind of all the materials that are in front of you, if that works.
And then we can do introductions, obviously.
Yeah.
Just as far as what you have before you, one of them is the department budget in brief. There are copies over there if you have not picked one up. So that's published by department for the department as a whole for the 2019 budget. We understand that the O&E documents are online, so those are accessible from their internet site. And then our budget justification, or our green book as we tend to refer to it, there were production issues as far as having them available today. I think we'll have them printed by tomorrow, and we're going to have them online on the Reclamation website as of the beginning of this meeting. So it probably went live in the last 5 to 10 minutes. And then there's also a press package that's here. So it has a copy of the PowerPoint presentation we're going to walk through, has the press release for the Reclamation budget, and also has a group of fact sheets on particular subject areas that have some more detail in a composite fashion as well.
Let's go around and do introductions. So first of all, thank you all for being here and for joining us. Big day for me because I'm a new commissioner, and this is the first time I've been here for our budget release. So really appreciate the chance to see everybody in this way, and we'll get down to discussing the budget. But I am Commissioner Brenda Berman, and thanks many of you for support in my nomination and in the Senate, and look forward to working with everybody.
And I'm Bob Wolf with the Program and Budget Office.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is David Colombo. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Operations for the Bureau.
Greg Haney, Deputy Commissioner, Policy Administration, Budget for the Bureau.
Tim Petty, Assistant Secretary for Water and Science.
Austin Ewell, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Water and Science.
Olivia Sandberg with Marcus Faust, who represents several water entities throughout California, Nevada, and Utah.
Ian Lyle with the National Water Resources Association.
And my name is Ryan Jackson, I'm the chairman of the Valley Tribe. I want to also offer congratulations to the commission.
Thank you very much.
Joe Fendauer here for Coachella Water District.
Peter Carlson, Willow Carlson, Oregon Water Resources Center.
Betsy Cody Research and Consulting, and also University of Maryland National Associate of Environmental Sciences.
Joe Rader with Ferguson Group. We're representing irrigation districts in California, Idaho, and Oregon.
Dave Reynolds, the Association of California Water Agency.
Chris Kearney with Ferguson.
Ryan Combs with Ferguson Group. We represent California water districts.
Pam?
Pam Williams, Secretary of the Indian Waterways Office.
Josh Mann, Congressional Affairs.
Tracy Goodluck, Secretary of the Indian Waterways Office.
Marty Von Benecton, also Secretary of the Indian Waterways Office.
I'm James Hess, Chief of Staff with Reclamation.
Chris Jenkins, Budget, Reclamation.
Kristen Knight, Program and Budget.
Ben Kessel, Program and Budget. Patrick Jones, Interior Budget.
Beth Hughes Brown, Program and Budget.
Joe Rosso with Semi-Tropic Groundwater Authority.
Welcome everyone. I think because we haven't been able to get ourselves back online here, there is a PowerPoint in each of your packets. So let's go through from there. So first I want to say our mission is pretty straightforward. Reclamation's mission is to deliver water and generate power in an environmentally and economically sound manner. And that's what we intend to do. We are doubling down on our mission. We are going to focus, and I think we are best when we focus on delivering water and generating power for the American people. Thanks. So that's what this budget looks at. That's what we are focusing on as an organization, and we'll just start going through. So we face a number of water supply challenges out there, and we will continue to focus on those. Everything from California water issues to the Colorado River, the Columbia River system, the Platte, the Arkansas. It's kind of you know where we work, and all of those are very important to us, and we will continue to focus there. When we think about delivering water and generating power, to me that means, can we do it now and can we do it in the future? So to me that means infrastructure. You know, how are we going to make ourselves reliable for this generation and for the next? So when you look at what we're focusing on, it's how do we make ourselves reliable? How do we look at our infrastructure we have and take care of it? How do we look at future infrastructure? How do we make sure we're getting ahead of our environmental responsibilities so that we can deliver that water in a safe manner? Also, the Secretary is very focused on recreation and access to public lands, and Reclamation has magnificent public lands. And we have hundreds of recreation sites, but some of them are the most iconic in the nation. You look at Lake Mead, you look at Glen Canyon, sort of water sports, and on the Colorado River as well. On the generation side, just want to say that we work with so many folks and the power users, and many of our programs are off budget and some of them are on budget. But looking ahead, I think you all know we're the second largest hydro producer in the nation. We produce about 15% of the nation's hydro generation, and that's pretty impressive, and we plan to keep it that way. Looking at it, you know, whether it's drought on the Colorado River, drought in other places, looking at how do we keep our generation infrastructure efficient, how do we keep it producing, kind of looking at all those issues we're facing kind of in a current world, looking at how do we make our generation, if there's less head on the reservoir, how do you maybe produce as much energy as you were before? So we've been looking into that in all the regions for a number of years, and we'll continue to do that. Let's see, I'm on slide 5 right now. But again, talking about recreation access, we are working with the Secretary's office to see what's possible out there. We have many, many partners in the West that help us with recreation. Often they're local towns, local districts, that allow us to provide boat ramps and campgrounds and all those sorts of things that allow people recreation access. And so we are working with the department to explore if there's more of those that can be done, if there's more partnerships. And we're also, it doesn't show up in the budget per se, but we're out there looking for, like, what are the innovative ideas about how do we fund recreation? Conservation. You've seen the Secretary's priorities, and we have them listed further on in the presentation. But one of the #1 priorities of the Secretary is the conservation of our water resources. And he's a firm Teddy Roosevelt conservationist, and we are too. So endorsing those principles, we're going to strive to make our water more reliable, and we're going to do that by finding more storage. We're going to do it by working with folks with Water Smart grants and our other programs out there. How do we conserve our water resources to create new supplies? We are basically trying to look at an all of the above strategy as far as how do we make water more reliable in the future. Looking at water storage, I think that's key. I mean, you look at our past generations and what they went ahead and did to build water storage so that we would be reliable. And so we too are trying to look forward in that 40 or 50 year time frame, like what is going to be needed, like what kind of water storage are we going to need. And we've been studying water storage for a long time, and so it's time to figure out whether we're actually going to build some. And we will be focusing on that in the next several years. So with that sort of lead in, I think we're getting to our numbers, and I'm going to pass that over to Bob Wolf.
Okay, so we're now on slide 6, which I see is up on the screen. So, this is our account structure, and we show the FY 2017 enacted level. And as it says in the footnote, that includes $200 million that was added by Congress in the final appropriation in categories that we then allocated through spending plans for the most part. Our budget documents, the Green Book, the department budget documents, UMB documents, for the 18 column, they're going to use the continuing resolution annualized number, which is basically the same as the 17 enacted, with a slight adjustment for an across-the-board reduction or special circumstances. Ours is just across the board. We thought it was useful in this presentation to show the 2018 President's budget for comparison, because that's a more relevant thing, I think, just to understand what the numbers are for the 19 President's budget. So our primary account that makes up the large bulk of our money is the Water and Related Resources account. That's $891 million. We'll have a little bit of a breakdown that on a subsequent slide. The next one is the Policy Administration. You'll see an increase there of a couple $1 million from 59 to 61 million. Largely what that represents is part of there's a few $1 million in there for reorganization efforts. That's part of a department-wide effort. The department, I think their budget in brief will talk about 17.5 million for reorganization department-wide, and our piece of that is about 3.4 million spread between two accounts. California Bay Delta is $35 million, so that's pretty comparable to what we've had the last couple of years. And in the Central Valley Project Restoration Fund, you'll see a large increase there. That's related to the 3-year rolling average, which has been going on since the bill was passed in the early 1990s. And it goes through a low, medium, high 3-year cycle, and this happens to be the high year of the 3 years. So that appropriation request of the $62 million is expected to be fully offset by discretionary receipts assessed by the Secretary from water and power users. That is expected to be the $62 million. So the total gross current authority before that offset is $1.049 billion. That's part of the budget request. So next slide. This is just a pie chart to give you a visual of a breakdown by the account structure. So again, the Water and Related Resources account, you can see, makes up the vast majority of the appropriation request, and then the other accounts are fairly small pie slices as part of that. Next slide breaks down the Water and Related Resources in particular. And we have 5 programmatic activities that are displayed in the pie chart. But when Congress does their congressional reports that identify our program in the appropriation process, they group the water and energy management development, the land management, and fish and wildlife management development. They call that resource management development, which is the right side there, and it makes up just barely over 50% of the total water and related resources request. The left side is our facility operation, maintenance, and rehabilitation is how Congress displays it in their congressional documents. We break it down into facility operations, which is more the day-to-day activity. That's about 1/3 of our total budget, close to $300 million. And then the facility maintenance, which is the more extraordinary maintenance or non-routine stuff, is $148.3 million. So that includes things like dam safety, and we'll have a slide on that later, but the dam safety actually makes up a significant portion of that total. So we'll move to slide 9. This is the department priorities and initiatives and how they come down to the reclamation program specifically. For the top 10 priorities for the secretary at the department level, in the budget and brief, it's on department highlights, page 6 has a listing of those 10 priorities. But what we've tried to do is to bring it down to a reclamation level to make it more understandable and applicable to our budget request. So the generating revenues and utilizing natural resources, of course, the commissioner talked about the power program and how we're able to use power revenues to finance. We use a rule of thumb of about 80% of our power program comes from the Bonneville Power, Western Power, or the power customers directly. Modernizing our organization and infrastructure, we've talked about the reorganization a little bit, and then the infrastructure, we're trying to look out into the future, obviously, and make sure that we're doing an appropriate job in addressing current infrastructure needs and future infrastructure needs as well. That's where the water supply and storage that the commissioner mentioned comes into play. Fulfilling our trust responsibilities is a very important one. It's a big part of our budget. We'll have a slide on that in a few minutes. Expanding outdoor recreation access, commissioners covered those. People and border, conserving land, management efficiencies. And then the environmental restoration compliance is part of things that we need to do in order to make sure that we can deliver the water and generate the power and meet biological opinion requirements, those kinds of things. Invasive species has been a key priority of the current administration, and the concept there is to try to, we have infestation from quagga and zebra mussels in the Colorado River Basin and some other areas around the West, and we're trying to make sure they do not get introduced into the Columbia River Basin. That's one of the focal points, and there's a larger number for invasive species overall, but the quagga zebra specific dollar amount for 2019 is about $7.6 million, roughly comparable with the 18 number. Colorado River and California water, we'll talk about those specifically, and then research and development is a continuing priority for Reclamation to be able to look into the future as far as how we make sure that we do a good job for the next 100 years again. So modernizing infrastructure, these are numbers that we've used in different presentations when we had the request for information forum out in Denver. I think these were part of a slide that we had as part of that presentation. And it just shows the significance of infrastructure to the reclamation program. We have that 5-year estimate, the major rehabilitation and replacement. Only part of that is funded through annual appropriations. There's a large part that comes directly from power customers or water customers. So it's not as daunting as it looks, but it is still a very significant number and requires significant appropriations to help fund that. And we have the deferred maintenance number and the dam safety needs over the next 5 years. A couple things on new construction activities, rural water projects. We have 5 authorized rural water projects for construction right now. There's $13.8 million in the 2019 budget, but you can see there's a large balance to complete if you look at the total authorized appropriation request. And we'll come back to that in a few minutes. Indian water rights settlements, $1.5 billion balance to complete. Part of that, again, will be able to be funded through mandatory funds in the future, but there's still a significant appropriation requirement. The total for Indian water rights will have a number of $127.4 million in our documents, but that $100.7 million is kind of the new construction activity that's ongoing right now with the settlements that have occurred since 2009. And then large numbers for water and power infrastructure as we move into the future as well. Finally, we're working with water contractors on potential new water storage that was talked about in several areas in California, and then we're also doing studies and looking at opportunities around the West in general, not just in California. And we'll be looking at alternative types of financing. We've been very successful on some public-public partnerships over the years to ease the burden on the appropriation request, and also where we had customers and stakeholders who had the means to help finance things. And we have a couple of very good examples of that, where we got over $100 million on a couple of projects that only required a minimal amount of appropriations. So those have been very successful. We're also aware that the administration's infrastructure proposal was released today, so that's online on the OMB website, and that's something we'll be taking a careful look at and trying to make sure that we get information out there and explore for the best opportunities for Reclamation to take advantage of that and our customers. So slide 11 is just a compilation of some of the statistical things and how many dams we have, and the fact that our dam safety program is important. And the total for the dam safety request is $88.1 million for 2019. That's comparable to our budget request last year. We think it's a very good budget request to make sure that we're addressing the public risk and safety issues. And about $66.5 million of that is for actually infrastructure improvements and modernization of the dam safety and improvements in public safety. We have about $20 million and change for the evaluations that we continue to do to make sure that we're reviewing our entire portfolio of high-risk facilities and to make sure that we're addressing any issues by developing studies and monitoring of anything that we identify. And then there's about $1.3 million for the Department Dam Safety Program, of which the Commissioner is the designee of the Secretary. And then finally, the extraordinary maintenance, $45 million in the budget request for extraordinary maintenance items across the West. That's independent of the dam safety number that we just saw. And it's something that, again, we have a lot of extraordinary maintenance that is done through means other than annual appropriations. So that's the piece that requires annual appropriations from Congress. And this is just a slide describing the department puts out an annual economic report each year. The latest one is for the fiscal year 2016 timeframe, and it just identifies some of the value and significance of how reclamation contributes to the economy in the West. $48.1 billion in economic output and 388,000 jobs. And the Commissioner's already identified the significance of the hydropower, which is that last bullet. Okay, what's slide 14? And this just has a short overview of the appropriation request for the energy side. That's sort of a reclamation-wide program to make sure that we're looking at our reclamation program west-wide to ensure we're using the best types of techniques and the latest developments in managing our program. And that's supplemented by power customer funding as well. So that's just a small piece of the overall picture. For tribal support, I mentioned the number of $127.4 million is the total for Indian water rights settlements. So it includes that $100.7 million for the 4 more current settlements. So the Crow is funded at $12.8 million for 19, again comparable to last year. Amit, $8.3 million, comparable to last year. Navajo Gallup is $69.6 million. That's lower than last year, but that's because we have mandatory funding that will become available beginning in 2020 from the Reclamation Water Settlement Fund that was established 10 years ago. But for PAYGO purposes, the funds do not become available until 2020. So Navajo Gallup is authorized to receive up to $500 million, and they're the first priority beginning in 2020. And the expectation is under that legislation will be $120 million per year for water rights settlements beginning in the 2020 timeframe. So we were able to accommodate a change in the Navajo Gallup, but still be on track for making sure that we complete it in the timeframes in the Settlement Act, which is 2025. And then finally, of the more current settlements, the Blackfeet settlement is funded at $10 million. That's the same as last year. And that one has a 2025 date as well. And significant amounts between now and then, so that's one that we'll be looking at very carefully in future years. And it potentially will have access to the Reclamation Water Settlement Fund as well as would Amet and Crow if necessary. There's another $33.9 million for rural water projects that are not formal Indian water rights settlements, but they support tribes. $10.6 million to the Native American Affairs Program itself, which is negotiation and implementation of water rights settlements, technical assistance, and then other services that are necessary to help support the Native American Affairs Program within Reclamation. And then finally, there are many other projects that benefit tribes, the Trinity River Restoration Program, Yakima River. A lot of them have to do with fisheries and other purposes that help support tribal interests. So page 16 is the expanding outdoor recreation. That just has some statistics, and the commissioner, I think, has already expressed the importance of the current secretary is placing on recreation and access to recreation. So we're trying to make sure that we do our part. We also have a site security program. So that's primarily, we have national critical infrastructure facilities, which are the primary thing that we're trying to make sure that we have adequate measures in place with guards, surveillance, and hardening of infrastructure to make sure that we're protecting those facilities. And then it goes beyond those, but that's where the primary effort is, those 5 national critical infrastructure facilities. And then conserving land and water, Water Smart has been an important program for us as far as collaboration with non-federal partners in trying to address water supply needs around the West. And it's a competitive grant program along with some complementary programs that have allowed us to stretch water supplies. So it helps, as you can see, cost share grants, and then it has several different programs. So the next page has an outline of the budget numbers. So for Water Smart grants, it's $10 million. The Title 16 Water Reclamation Reuse, $3 million. And the 2019 budget for the Title 16 is focused on research rather than the financial assistance piece for construction.
Is that why there's such a big, why is such a big drop in Water Smart grants and Title 16? For the president's request from last year?
I think it's primarily to do with the total budget numbers or available to Reclamation in formulating the budget.
So just what your allocation was, yeah?
Yeah. And then basin studies, I think the documents will talk about not initiating new basin studies in 2019, but those funds would be used for ongoing work on basin studies. Drought response has been an important for us the last few years. That's the $2.9 million. Resilient infrastructure was phased out. And that was a natural thing that we were planning on phasing that out long-term anyway, and that occurred in 2018. And then the cooperative watershed management is really for the phase 1, which is the formation of river basin groups, as opposed to the implementation in phase 2. So that's $19.9 million in total. Next slide is just talking about management efficiencies. So just an effort to make sure that we're using taxpayer funds in the best possible manner. So that's something that we're always striving for. There is, Lennon, I'll bring your attention to, we talked about it in the budget last year, the title transfer legislative proposal. So it was mentioned. It's not a budget item per se, but it's something that's an important initiative, I think, for the administration. And do you want to say anything about that one, Commissioner?
Title transfer?
Yeah.
We are looking to very soon transfer proposed legislation to the Hill. And we had talked about that in our FY18 budget, and we've worked on it for a long time, and that should be imminent.
And then partner funding I've talked about a couple times, but we really try to take advantage of leveraging what are limited federal resources to make sure that we're doing the best possible job related to our facilities and building new infrastructure, whatever the particular needs are. We're also paying close attention to the Federal IT Acquisition Reform Act. So that's cybersecurity, that's an important one. And then one of the things we like to point out as far as the where Reclamation is located, we actually have a pretty small staff here in Washington, D.C. It's been in the range of 60 to 65 people, and out of about 5,000 or so Reclamation-wide, they are primarily located out west. So I think that's something that we have been doing for a number of years to try to make sure that we serve the public, but there are, well, we're always taking a relook at that. In the data modernization, we've been working on an initiative for a few years on open water data to have information accessible to the public so that it can be used to on projects and for other purposes as well. So water reliability and efficiency, these are just a couple of the larger dollar numbers we wanted to highlight. In the Lower Colorado River Operations Program, the Secretary is the water master of the Lower Colorado River for the 3 lower basin states. So there's a water accounting function that makes up part of that budget request. But there's also a significant amount for the Multi-Species Conservation Program, so that provides 50-year ESA protection under both Section 7 and Section 10, so both federal and non-federal projects. That's an important part of our being able to deliver water into the future on the Colorado River and provide some certainty, which is what we're always looking for. The Central Valley Project in total is $147.5 million, and we're just pointing out that close to $12 million of that is for the Trinity River Restoration Program, $17.5 million in total for the Klamath Project, and $23.5 million for Middle Rio Grande, and a little over $11 million is for their endangered species program as part of that. Also there's a line item for endangered species across the regions, that's a little over $19 million. The Platte River is a significant piece of that. And there's also the Upper Colorado Recovery Implementation Program. Both of those have been very successful, again, in providing certainty for water users by having measures in place to not have crises on an ongoing basis. They've worked very well in giving us the certainty on water delivery. $19 million for the Columbia Snake River Salmon Recovery Program, a little over 13 for the Yakima River Basin Water Enhancement Project, and then the $62 million we previously mentioned for the CVP Restoration Program. And there's a couple of $1 million for specific purposes that are identified in the legislation and identified in that parenthetical. And then $35 million for the San Joaquin River Restoration Program. That's part of the $145 or $147 million we had for CVP that's specific to San Joaquin River Restoration in the Bryant Division. Invasive species we covered with the $7.6 million for prevention, early detection, and monitoring. And again, the focus is on trying to prevent introduction into the Columbia River Basin, but that means also trying to work in the Colorado River Basin and some of the other areas where they're already in place. The Colorado River generally is a very important focus for reclamation. We've had a couple of normal years, but most of them have been below normal years on the hydrology for the last 17, 18 years. So there's a lot of concern about water levels in Lake Mead and hoping to avoid shortage provisions. So Reclamation and the department have taken a number of proactive measures to try to address that. And so there's a system conservation program. We're still working on drought contingency plans to be developed. And then the Minute 323, the international agreement that was achieved as an update to the successor to Minute 319, That provides some certainty on that front through 2026. So a lot of good things we're doing there, and a lot of that is funded through the Lower Colorado River Operations Program, but again, in partnership with the 3 lower basin states and in districts within those 3 basin states. The Title I and Title II salinity control efforts are again important. The Title I is the international one, but it also, we're taking measures to conserve water on the U.S. side that help us meet the treaty requirements to Mexico without taking more water out of Lake Mead than necessary. And the Title II is a water quality program really focused in the upper basin state, but we're making good progress there. And then finally, the Glen Canyon LTEMP, or Long-Term Experimental Management Plan. For California water, as we mentioned, there's $35 million for the California Bay Delta program. Pretty consistent with recent requests. And the authorization for that program, the Public Law 108-361, was extended through fiscal year 2019 in the WIN Act in December of 2016. So we've had to request an extension of that in the appropriations in several years, but with the WIN Act extension, there's no proposal in 2019 for that because it's unnecessary. And then finally, the San Joaquin River Restoration at $35 million, just a little information on it with the focus on continued structure that the Mendota Pool bypass is one of the major things, major activities in 2019. Next slide, just a little more details on the overall Central Valley Project Restoration Fund. So slide 26 is what I'm on. And I think we pretty much covered, that's just an ongoing program, but with a higher funding level based on the 3-year rolling average. And then the next slide, just research and development is very important to us. So we have $11 million to support the science and technology program, and there's $2.9 million for the desal and water purification program. And one of the things that you've probably seen in the last several years is we're doing these what they call X prizes is one terminology for it, but things that have very small dollar amounts associated with them, but it's an invitation for anyone to come up with creative ideas and receive an award for doing that. And that's something that we do news releases at the time we do it. So it's a very small part of the $11 million, but it's been an important thing for us to try to come up with creative ideas. And the next slide looks very much like the last slide, I think. So we'll move on to 29. This is just, obviously the Congress has not completed the task of the FY 2018 appropriations. They reached a budget deal on increasing the caps for 2 years for both fiscal year 2018 and 2019. But what we wanted to represent here is just the status of additional funding that was in the House version, House passed version of 2018, and the Senate committee version of 2018, just as a reminder of where they left off in the process as they head into trying to conference a bill. So rural water was a large dollar amount in the House and Senate versions. Facility operation and maintenance has usually been a pretty small number, so that's $4 million versus 1.8. Fish greens and fish passage, that's been focused on Central Valley Project and Cle Elum in the last couple of years up in the Yakima Basin, where we're building a major fish passage facility. The water conservation has a very large number. That's much larger in 17 and 18 than it was in prior years. But that has $67 million has been separated out of that for purposes of water storage, consistent with the WIN Act in both the House and the Senate markups of that. And then the environmental restoration compliance, $5 and $15 million. The language in the Senate associates that with sections 4001 and 4010 of the WIN Act, which is Central Valley Project related. There are other small changes in addition to these in the Water Smart program, generally with small increases, but those are specific to those programs as opposed to the more general categories. But they have been adding money in Title 16. There's $10 million in both the House and Senate version, specific to the WIN Act authorization for Title 16 projects. And then there's $6 million under the desal for desalination, again, consistent with the WIN Act authorization in 2016. So that brings us to the end of the presentation, and we did not cover CUPCA today because that's a department program, but Tim Petty was here. I think he may have had to leave. But Patrick Jost from the department is here if there's any questions on CUPCA, and then we're available for any questions on Reclamation.
Commissioner and Bob, it's a two-part question. Was Reclamation involved in the administration's infrastructure plan that was rolled out this morning? And I asked the question in the context of, out of the $200 billion, $50 billion is for rural America, the rural side of things. And so for those of us who represent rural entities in the water side of things in the reclamation program, should we be looking at that money in that side for additional infrastructure work?
I would say that Reclamation was not directly involved in the discussion of the infrastructure package, but certainly leadership at Interior was and knew about Reclamation's priorities. So I was glad to see rural projects in there getting the 50, and that I think can be used by our customers and partners and can be used for matching with Reclamation, and so we're very hopeful that that program leads to a lot more building in rural America. David? Oh, sorry.
You got the mic.
I couldn't see Ian.
Oh, I get the mic. Bob, you mentioned the wind funding. I'm just, what's the easiest way to track that through here? And particularly, there's a science and monitoring provision of that. It's important for the Delta monitoring. So where would I find those numbers?
You mean track it in the 2019 President's request?
Do I have to wait for the Green Book, or?
Well, I don't think we've lined it up specifically by those sections. We're well aware that Congress has been adding money for related to those activities. So we did. There was $7 million added in 2017 that we used a spending plan to allocate that for those activities. But there's clearly a lot of monitoring and science in both the California Bay Delta account. Within that $35 million, you'll see a lot of money there.
Mm-hmm.
And then also within the Central Valley Project, there's multiple programs that we're focused on looking at Delta smelt, trying to make sure we have more monitoring locations, better science information to make operational decisions. And with the WIN Act in general, there's a lot of new things that we're trying to take advantage of, storm events and those kind of things that I think you're well aware of, and that's all part of that overall picture.
Okay, so that funding will be in several different areas?
Yeah, we don't have something that says this is X dollars for WIN sections 401, 4001 and 4010.
Okay.
I'm curious about new capital construction and work related to anything along those lines that you would identify as new money for capital construction.
Well, one of the areas is Indian water rights settlements. So if you look at the Navajo Gallup Water Supply Project, that $69.6 million will be leveraged with some mandatory funds. So that program is probably $100 million or more per year in construction activity. The rural water program, those are ones where they're either done through tribal governments or funds that are provided to other entities, so they're not federally owned projects, but there's been a lot of construction in those areas. For 2019, the focus of the rural water program is on the tribal side of the rural water. So there's about $20.2 million just for operation, maintenance, and rehabilitation of tribal water systems under the rural water program. And then that $13+ million we identified is really focused on the tribal features. It depends on how you define construction, because there's a lot of things going on. Bonneville Power, for example, we have over $260 million a year that's directly funded by Bonneville, and over $100 million of that 260 is for extraordinary maintenance and rehabilitation. So depending on how you define construction, that's major construction kind of activity, even though it's upgrading or rehabilitating existing facilities.
Right, got it, okay. Great, thanks.
Can we get to Ian? I think he's been waiting.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you. First, just want to thank you guys for allowing us to come in today and provide the briefing. I think that Reclamation probably generates more per dollar invested than many of its sister interior agencies. And just looking at the numbers you guys provided, $1 billion invested turns around $48 billion in economic activity each year. So I mean, that's huge. I wish my bank account did that every year. That would make me feel really good. But looking at the some of the numbers, obviously you guys have to work within the allocation that you're provided, but I know that many of our members have seen a lot of value in the water and related resources account, and understand that that's taken a bit of a reduction this year. So recognizing, as Peter noted, that there is maybe an opportunity to look for opportunities for reclamation projects to get funded through the infrastructure package. I would just offer that we would like to be helpful in that effort in making sure Reclamation is at the table in that conversation, because really, just thinking about like the Park Service as an example, great agency, but I think that Reclamation with $1 billion and a third of the staff provides a greater economic impact than the Park Service. And so we'd love to see Reclamation involved within that infrastructure framework. So anything we can do on that front, please let us know, because we'd love to do that.
Thank you. And I would say the State of the Union speech talked about waterways, and that certainly involves reclamation. And so we'll be working with Congress to make sure that reclamation is recognized. And I think we get lost sometimes because we're Western, and it's just not as much of a focus for some. And the president believes in waterways and water infrastructure. The president's been very focused on some Western water issues, and so we will accept help where we can find it, and we'll be working with Congress about that.
And I think the one thing that is actually helpful, they're talking about water rather than it's all transportation. So the fact that water is even mentioned is a positive.
For the San Joaquin River Restoration Program, if I remember correctly, the Secretary can spend money from the Restoration Fund without appropriation beginning in FY19. The budget here is for appropriations, $35 million. Maybe this answer is in the Green Book, but I'll ask it anyway. Are there unappropriated funds in the FY19 budget for the restoration program?
Well, there was, I think, as you know, Joe, there was $88 million in early mandatory funds that were available based on the originally enacted legislation. The access to the additional mandatory funds is October 1st, 2019. So 2019 is correct, but it's actually fiscal year 2020. So it would be next year when we would, the next year's budget, when we'd be able to identify access to those additional mandatory funds.
Commissioner Bob, there was a February 9th letter from the Senate Western Caucus to the President on the infrastructure issue. There were 12 bullet points in the letter, but the last one particularly caught my attention given the slide that you used on your O&M budget, and what it's asking for is to address the maintenance backlogs. Historically, your budget, the core budget, gets chopped 50 to 60% on O&M. And so I'm wondering what can be done per their request to kind of eat away at that O&M backlog within Reclamation, within your program, given this new emphasis on infrastructure by the President.
So I haven't actually seen the letter, as I hate to quote on things, to comment on things I haven't seen, but in general, I'd say we are trying to look at sort of an all-of-the-above strategy. So I know there are a number of ideas from you all, from Congress, grassroots ideas about how do we finance projects. And given limited resources at sort of the appropriations level, we can put our focus on that, but I think it's a lot about customer upfront funding. It's about finding new ways to finance. There are a number of ideas out there, and for our part, we've been trying to say, let's look at all of them. Let's be creative here, because it is a major focus, and I think it's our responsibility to make sure our program and our infrastructure is modernized. So we are kind of looking to everyone out there. We're looking at, at our own ability to kind of leverage different ways to finance things. But is there anything you'd want to comment on, Bob?
No, I think you've covered it.
One additional question.
I think it was mentioned there was about, and I apologize if I get the number a little bit off, but Bob, I think you mentioned there was about $3 million in the budget to look at reorganization. Would it be possible to get a briefing for customers on the status of that and what's kind of being discussed for with regard to reclamation? We've heard some stuff in the trade press and things like that, but I'm not sure if there's been an opportunity to brief water users, and that would be very much appreciated if we could get something like that set up.
I know you have a meeting coming up in about 2 months, and I can certainly address it there. I think what I'd say is, whatever I've read has been about 75% myth. And we're at the very, very beginnings of this discussion. And the Secretary, a couple weeks ago, he brought in SES from across the departments, Park Service, BLM, BIA. We had some of the folks who are doing, kind of cross-agency work really well, like the Interagency Fire Center. And the idea was to seek input from leadership for us across the West, but for others across the nation and covering the oceans, about how could we be smarter about if we had some more reliable borders, if we could share regions with some of our sister agencies, could we make it easier to coordinate, whether it's on permitting, whether it's sharing resources, whether Reclamation maybe could share some of its engineers and someone else could share some of their HR people. And so we're really at the beginning, and they're taking a lot of input from the states, from interest groups, from locals, definitely from Reclamation is right in there talking about our priorities and sort of how we're managed on watersheds. So I would say it's very early. That $3 million is in there, knowing it's a while from now. There's no particular plan about anything moving. There's certainly no plans for. The Secretary said this does not involve RIFs. This does not involve laying people off. It is not about that at all. But I would say that there's a lot of input being taken right now. And so if you have strong opinions about what should happen with the different agencies, I would get your opinion in there. But we had a lot of positive feedback when we brought out our SCSers and others, just because I think they have a lot of frustration. Sometimes there's competition out in the regions between the different agencies, and trying to just find sort of better ways to cooperate and coordinate.
Thank you.
Sure.
Like to say anything?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, again, my name is Ryan Jackson, Chairman, Hoopa Valley Tribe in Northern California. In the book here, it talks about funding for support tribes and the resolution of their water right claims, increase opportunities to develop, manage, and protect water and related resources. Also strengthens department-wide capabilities to achieve an integrated and systematic approach to Indian water rights negotiations to consider full-range economic, legal, and technical attributes of proposed settlements. I would just highlight, obviously, budgets are out there and funding's made available to achieve some kind of purpose, a goal, get to an end. And for the Hoopa tribe, we're going through a process now of renegotiating the Klamath River settlement. The previous settlement was the Klamath Basin Restoration Agreement, which we're thankful wasn't enacted. There are some good things about it. Unfortunately, it wasn't able to get across the finish line, but Mr. Mickelson is out there now, and we've had a number of discussions with him as well as David Murillo out in the Pacific region. And the integration of what is highlighted here as a goal is something that we've touched on for a number of years, as far as the way in which the basin is managed and the impacts of a decision that's made on the Klamath River. It has a direct impact on the Trinity River as well as the Central Valley. As you can see with the diversions into the lower Klamath, the FARs that are released every year in order to protect the resources, in order to manage the water in a more efficient manner. We're hoping that the department, along with yourself, the Commissioner, and now I think he's Senior Advisor to the Secretary, Alan, will take a broader look at how all of these things are going to be happening, and that there will be a focus on ensuring that the senior rights of tribal members or tribal governments in the basin are recognized, and that if funds are necessary or if there's a way to work out a settlement that meets all of those needs, we're happy to do that. As well, I'm not a big budget guy, and looking at the San Joaquin and the Central Valley and all those other things, kind of focus on Hoopa priorities, but I don't see anywhere where the San Luis drainage settlement is a part of the 19 narrative. It might be in there, but I would hope that the department would take a closer look at those impacts of the drainage settlement on the Hoopa Valley tribe. The San Luis unit was created out from the Trinity River Division, which is the authorizing law for the dam and the diversions in the Central Valley. Obviously, it has had a real detrimental impact in a lot of ways on the tribes because of those diversions and the degradation of the water and the resource and the fishery that we rely on. Our hope, and we've talked to a number of folks in Congress as well as folks within the department, that if a drainage settlement like that is enacted or Congress takes those steps, that the tribe's interests also be protected, in that the Trinity River is obviously a resource of the tribe and something that we hold dearly. But we're hoping that in the future, the interest of the tribe will be met if a drainage settlement is enacted and there's funding made available for those types of things. As well, I'd like to touch on some of the infrastructure stuff. I see you saw dams and some different things that are in there, and there's no doubt about it. But there's also a federal hatchery that manages Trinity River salmon, as well as the Klamath River salmon, that need serious upgrades and improvements. And we've talked to, again, David Murillo and Don Glazier over the years about those needs as a result of the dwindling populations of salmon and resources on the Trinity River and the Klamath River. And the state of California manages that hatchery not very well, I would point out, and it is a federal hatchery, and Bureau of Reclamation contracts that out to the state of California. It needs serious upgrades, as well. The Iron Gate hatchery on the Klamath River as well needs some serious improvements. There's an effort under the Hydroelectric Settlement Act to transfer federal authority to the state of California after a period of 8 years, which we don't feel like the federal government has that ability to transfer its federal trust responsibilities to the state of California. Nonetheless, there are some improvements that are needed there as well. But again, I just don't want to take up too much time. We appreciate the opportunity. Commissioner, again, congratulations. Hope to talk to you in the future, talk to a number of folks on your staff, and look forward to working with the Bureau in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for noting your concerns. And
Hi, I'm Brian Funk with the Furman Group. Commissioner Berman, Mr. Wolf, thank you for the stakeholder meeting today. I had a question about the $10 million for WIN that you talked about earlier. That's currently in the House passed budget. Has there been any discussions about whether or not you're viewing that as a floor or a ceiling based on the total amount that will eventually be appropriated for Title 16?
I mean, I've seen the letter talking about that issue, but I would say that it's still under discussion.
Okay.
So just, I mean, a note for everyone, if you're not aware, Congress appropriated $10 million in fiscal year 2017 with the proviso in WIN that the projects have to be named in appropriation legislation is the way it's written, and they want to have recommendations from the Secretary. So we did send up a letter for the $10 million in 2017 funding in November, and that is being considered by the appropriations committees as they complete their 18 work. The 18 funds that are in the House and Senate version will have to see what the final dollar amount is and what the language is associated with that, but we're trying to have good discussions on trying to address the issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I'm sure you saw the snow survey the other day. Was even worse than 3 years ago in the Sierras. Can you make it snow?
Colorado River hydrology is tracking below 2002 right now.
And is the 2.9 in the Water Smart grant the only drought response funding in the budget?
In the sense of a program, yes. But I think you've heard a number of times that multi-year carryover storage, all the different things that Reclamation does are designed to help address droughts. It's just a matter of the severity and location and how we're able to identify it. Colorado River obviously would be in much more difficult situation if we didn't have Hoover and Glen Canyon there with the multi-year storage that's been available to help.
All the
address it.
programs we've done to put more water in Lake Mead, operations on the CVP system, trying to look for every opportunity to fill those reservoirs. So I would say there's a number of things we're doing across the West as far as trying to prepare for drought. And it was nice that last year was above average in a lot of places, and that's certainly helping, but there's no doubt about it, this year looks tough, particularly for those that don't have the storage from last year.
And as the chairman pointed out, it would be particularly stressful on the climate-based
It certainly will.
this coming year.
Is there going to be an opportunity to discuss those the climate water issues in a sort of broader sense as opposed to on the ground technical discussion? I think at some point at the policy level, folks need to really be engaged heavily in how all of that's going to play out in the future. He's right, it's going to be rather drastic. And I hate to play into the stereotype, but maybe to partner with Indian people to let go of the secret on how to make it snow and how to make it rain. It is serious.
Yeah, and I think the Secretary recognizes that in designating Alan Mickelson as his point person on all of those issues, on the Klamath area issues. I know he's been able to dedicate an incredible amount of time out there, and we're really thankful to have him. And Alan is transitioning out of Reclamation to the Secretary's office, but obviously knows Reclamation well and will be continuing to work with him. Betsy, did you have?
Yeah, kind of, I guess, with water situation made me think, do you have a date yet by which you think you'll be making an allocation announcement for the CVP?
By law, it's February 20th, and it'll be February 20th for the
Okay,
initial
I know that
allocation.
shifts sometimes, so, okay, thanks.
Sure. Anyone else? If not, I thank you for coming. I thank you for coming out, and of course, we'll continue to work with all of you on any particular questions you have. But thanks.
Okay, and we should have green books tomorrow, or at least early this week, and we can work with Public Affairs to get a notification out.
It's on the website now.
Yes, it should be on the website. As long as we didn't have technical difficulties, I assume we made it. Okay.